They thought the pound was untouchable. The politicians, the bankers, the proud economists of London. All of them believed Britain's currency was too powerful to fall. But they were wrong. Very wrong. This isn't just a story about numbers and charts. It's about ego. About a country that refused to admit it was bleeding. And about a man, George Soros, who saw the weakness before anyone else did. In the early 1990s, Europe was trying something new. They called it the European Exchange Rate Mechanism, or ERM. The goal was noble. Tie all European currencies together, make them stable, prepare for a future single currency, the euro. But stability came with a price. Every country had to keep its currency value locked within narrow limits. No room for mistakes, no room for weakness. And Britain was already struggling. Inflation was high. Interest rates were choking the economy. But the government insisted the pound will stay strong. It had to, because leaving the ERM would mean political humiliation. And politicians don't like humiliation. So they played a dangerous game, defending a currency that was already dying. Before the storm hit, Britain was already standing on shaky financial ground. It was the early 1990s, the Cold War had just ended, the world was celebrating capitalism's victory, and Europe was trying to unite under one economic flag, the European Exchange Rate Mechanism, ERM. The idea was simple, or at least it looked simple. Every country in the ERM would keep its currency stable against the Deutsche Mark, the powerful German currency that symbolized economic discipline. Britain joined the ERM in 1990, but it was already too late. The country's inflation was high, unemployment was rising, and its industries were struggling to compete. Still, politicians in London hoped joining the ERM would make them look strong, modern, European. But beneath the pride, the pound was bleeding. The British economy was weak, and tying its currency to Germany's powerhouse mark was like chaining a tired horse to a race car. The interest rates needed to stay high to defend the pound, but high rates were suffocating businesses and homeowners. Every tick upward in interest rates killed another small dream. And in the shadows, speculators were watching. They could smell blood. They saw a government desperate to look strong, and a currency that couldn't handle the weight. And among them was one man, George Soros, calm, patient, and calculating. He didn't just see numbers. He saw patterns, weakness, and inevitability. He knew the pound would fall, it had to fall. All he needed was the right moment to strike. In 1992, that moment arrived. The pound was overvalued. The economy was in recession. Germany had raised its interest rates after reunification, putting even more pressure on Britain to defend its own. London was caught between political pride and financial reality. Every economist in the city whispered the same thing: the pound can't hold. But the government refused to listen. The Chancellor, Norman Lamont, stood before the press and promised the pound was safe. But behind closed doors, the Bank of England was burning through billions of pounds trying to prop it up. Day by day, Soros watched. He waited for the exact second the illusion of control would shatter, and when it did, he would be ready to push. The Bank of England had no idea it was fighting a man who had already won in his mind. The pound's defense became a war of pride, not logic. And pride always loses against math. The morning of September 16, 1992, began like any other in London. But inside the Bank of England, the air was thick with panic. Phones rang endlessly. Traders shouted numbers that no longer made sense. The pound was collapsing, faster than anyone had predicted. Chancellor Norman Lamont watched as billions evaporated within minutes. Every attempt to defend the pound, every pound sterling spent, only made the fall steeper. It wasn't just a market correction anymore. It was a war. By 9 a.m., the Bank of England had burned through more than £1 billion trying to buy its own currency. Still, the markets didn't flinch. George Soros and his quantum fund were hammering the pound with massive short positions. They were betting that Britain would break. And they were right. In Washington, New York, Frankfurt, traders watched the chaos unfold. The British government was trapped. To stay in the exchange rate mechanism, interest rates had to rise. But raising them would crush the economy. It was a choice between political death and financial humiliation. By noon, the government raised interest rates from 10% to 12%. 2 hours later to 15%. The move was desperate. It didn't matter. Investors laughed. The pound continued to slide. That afternoon, Soros's team celebrated quietly in their New York office. The trade of the century was unfolding in real time. By sunset, Britain had surrendered. Norman Lamont announced the inevitable. The pound was leaving the ERM. The room fell silent. The Bank of England had lost billions, and George Soros had made over $1 billion in profit. That night, the streets of London glowed with neon reflections on wet cobblestones. The city didn't know it yet, but its financial system had changed forever. Paper had become power, and one man had just proven it. When the sun rose the next morning, London looked the same. But inside the Bank of England, nothing was. The air was heavy, the silence thicker than any fog over the Thames. The headlines were brutal: Black Wednesday, Britain defeated, pound crashes out. The bank had lost nearly £3.3 billion in one day. The government's credibility was in ruins. And the man who broke the bank, George Soros, had become a legend overnight. But in the days that followed, the panic began to fade. Something strange happened. Britain started to recover. Free from the chains of the exchange rate mechanism, the pound began to float freely. The market found its natural balance. Inflation fell. Exports rose. The economy started breathing again. What had looked like national humiliation was slowly becoming a strange kind of liberation. In Whitehall, ministers sat in disbelief. The political damage was irreversible. The Conservatives would never fully recover their reputation for economic competence. Yet, history would remember Black Wednesday as the event that indirectly gave rise to modern Britain's financial independence. And for Soros, he became a symbol of greed to some, of genius to others. To him, it wasn't about destroying Britain. It was about proving a truth that few dared to see, that even great empires can be broken by market forces. In the years that followed, new rules, new institutions, and new fears emerged. Black Wednesday wasn't just a collapse. It was a transformation. The world had seen the invisible hand of the market move with terrifying strength. And for a moment, it seemed unstoppable. In the years after Black Wednesday, the world changed in ways few could predict. Britain had fallen, yet from its ashes, a more flexible, self-reliant economy emerged. The lesson was brutal but unforgettable. Markets bow to no flag. Politicians began to treat markets like unpredictable gods, powerful, invisible, and sometimes vengeful. The term speculator became both insult and myth, and George Soros? He became a ghost haunting financial institutions. Every new crisis, from the Asian collapse in 1997 to the housing crash of 2008, whispered his name. Inside trading floors, young bankers studied his strategy like scripture. "Don't fight the market," they'd say, repeating Soros's law. Governments tried to build stronger systems, new safety nets, new currencies, but confidence had cracked forever. The idea that central banks could control everything was dead. Meanwhile, Britain rebuilt itself, slower, wiser, more cautious. The pound became a symbol not of pride, but of humility. And for the global market, Black Wednesday stood as an eternal reminder. No system is too strong to fail. The irony? What began as one man's billion-dollar bet ended up saving a nation from its own illusion of control. Freedom was expensive, but it was real. The market, like history, never forgets those who challenge it. Time did not erase Black Wednesday. It only amplified its echo, from London's financial towers to every trading desk across the globe. For the first time, nations realized that power was no longer held in armies or parliaments, but in capital flows. Money had become a weapon sharper than steel, faster than missiles. It moved invisibly, striking without warning, reshaping the fate of empires overnight. Soros hadn't destroyed the Bank of England. He had exposed its weakness, the illusion of control, the arrogance of certainty, the belief that governments could dictate value. By the late 1990s, a new kind of warfare began, fought not with guns, but with data, speculation, and fear. Every crash that followed, the Asian financial crisis, the dot-com bubble, the Great Recession, carried the ghost of 1992. Black Wednesday wasn't just a British story. It was a global awakening. And yet, behind the chaos, there was order. A silent rhythm of greed, risk, and consequence. The market punishes arrogance but rewards courage. It destroys the unprepared and glorifies those who dare. George Soros never claimed victory. He simply said, "I am not infallible. I just survive my mistakes." That was the true legacy. Not power, not profit, but perception. The day Britain's pound fell was the day the world realized that faith, not gold, holds the system together. Black Wednesday ended, but its shadow still moves with every market tick. A reminder that the strongest empire is only as stable as the belief that sustains it.